There is no end to the outrageously interesting things to discover in this vast, wondrous, and strange world we call home. All it takes is a healthy curiosity about the world around us. One fact about the planet's geography cannot be denied. Caves are mysterious and enticing places. You can't look at a cave without wondering what's inside of it. The frightening aspects of eerie caves are only one aspect of them. Ancient and prehistoric artifacts have been found in the caves. The habitats of organisms that we haven't even yet found exist in the caves. It is difficult to predict what fresh facts they would offer us in the form that might further inspire a different or revised version of history. Let's explore the most shocking and disturbing discoveries made by scientists in caves. Joseph Henry Loveless. The narrative of Joseph Henry Loveless began in the late 19th century. He was frequently detained in connection with, among other things, his activities as a bootlegger and a counterfeiter, and he became quite adept at eluding capture. Everyone was aware that he was a pretty bad person. That included his first wife, who filed for divorce at a period when it was almost unheard of. He was remarried to a woman named Agnes after his divorce. Up until May 5, 1916, they were camping outside of Du Bois, Idaho. She was dismembered with an axe at that point, and Loveless was apprehended after attempting to flee the area. Predictably, he managed to get away and disappeared. It wasn't until 2019 that his last fate became a grisly murder mystery and a little less enigmatic. A burlap-wrapped torso was discovered by a family who were exploring a cave outside of St. Anthony, Idaho, back in 1979. After another amateur explorer discovered a hand in 1991, 2 legs and the second arm were discovered during the subsequent examination. Later technological developments brought about the DNA Doe Project's involvement, and the remains were examined and linked to a man who was 87 years old at the time, Joseph Henry Loveless's grandson. Despite the fact that there are no known suspects in his death, Clark County Sheriff Bart May remarked, back in 1916, most likely the locals took care of the problem. An underwater graveyard filled with giant lemur bones. One of the oddest and wealthiest islands in the world, Madagascar is home to a wide variety of animals that cannot be found anywhere else. That has been the case for a very long period, and humans also destroyed that when they arrived there more than 2,000 years ago. At that time, the island was home to megafauna, including elephant birds and huge tortoises. Then it wasn't. No one has been able to pinpoint exactly what took place to produce such a drastic change in Madagascar's environment, but they have gained an excellent understanding of the species that perished. When paleontologists explored the undersea Aran Cave in 2014, they found that the bottom was covered in ancient megafauna remnants, along with a few species that are still alive today. There was a lot of wonderful stuff there, but the most interesting things were the huge lemur remains that were the size of gorillas. Given that the bones are 82 feet underwater, it is unclear how they got there. The current is believed to have transported them there, dropped them, and left them there undisturbed while they were first defleshed and then semi-fossilized. And that's just what they discovered on the surface. The discovery, which was deemed extraordinary, offered a special chance for experts to better understand what Madagascar's prehistoric terrain would have been like. 17 sizable coffins. A group of youngsters were exploring Arthur's Seat in Scotland on a June afternoon in 1836, when they just so happened to find what would later become one of the country's strangest mysteries. National Museum Scotland claims that while on their explorations, the lads happened onto a small cave. They discovered 17 miniature coffins inside the cave, each with a figure carefully dressed in tiny handmade clothing and snuggled inside. A few pieces of slate had been used to block the cave's entrance. Newspapers at the time reported on the discovery and immediately began yelling about witchcraft, demonology, and black magic, which was only natural. Others offered less bizarre theories, such as the notion that the dolls were effigies of friends who had perished in other regions or had gone missing at sea, and their proper ceremonies had been performed on the dolls in their stead. That's really nice, but the prevailing theory isn't quite as endearing. The 17 coffins are now believed to have been created and interred as a memorial to the 17 victims of infamous body snatchers William Burke and William Hare. They got their start when a boarder who shared the residence with Hare had the unfortunate circumstance of passing away while owing him money. They collected by selling him to a nearby anatomy school. Who produced them? Why was it actually intended as a memorial to Burke and Hare's victims? We probably won't ever find out. 11,000 years old mine. The daring required to explore underwater caverns is entirely different than that required to explore land-based caves. 2 divers were engaged in such activity in 2017, and it was there that they discovered something truly incredible. After diving more than half a mile into a cave beneath the Yucatan Peninsula, a threshold's appearance marked the beginning of it. After swimming over that unmistakably man-made barrier, they arrived inside what was later discovered to be an 11,000-year-old mine. What is the mine for? The brilliant red pigment known as ochre was previously extracted by prehistoric humans, who utilized it for everything from cave paintings to funeral ceremonies and as a mosquito repellent. The location was referred to as a time capsule of human activity, filled with the remains of tools, fires, and even a number of cairns, which are rock mounds used by miners to maintain their bearings while they were underground. When the location was thoroughly investigated, it eventually helped to throw light on the use of a number of other mines, and there was a lot of extremely high-quality ochre, according to archaeologists. Interestingly, myths about caves and the afterlife imply that the pigments that came from such a deep cave certainly held some spiritual significance. The fact that this originated from a hallowed location, and that a journey inside the cave was made just to obtain it may be of great significance. Kabayan mummies. It's safe to conclude that individuals who entered their loved ones there understood their significance much more than UNESCO can convey. The Kabayan mummy burial caves of the Philippines are now recognized by UNESCO for their cultural significance. The Ibuloy tribe used the caves for their embalming practices, which were reminiscent of those used in ancient Egypt. Those who were aware of their finite lifespan would begin the mummification process by ingesting a salty mixture, and the process would be finished over the weeks that followed the death. The bodies would then be finished and deposited in the ancient burial caves, where they were relatively recently uncovered by loggers, where they would then be interred in elaborate wooden coffins. With the entrance of Europeans in the 16th century, the traditional traditions had come to a stop, yet mummies had survived for a very long period. The opening of the caves caused a variety of issues, since the caverns are no longer used yet are still revered by the Ibuloy. It quickly became necessary to safeguard them from pests, fungus, and humans being, well, people. Since the caves were found, the mummies have undergone significant research, and some, like the chieftain Apo Anu, have been reburied there. There's also a really interesting postscript to this. According to archaeology, research into the stunning tattoos discovered on many of the mummies has enabled contemporary descendants to duplicate their ancestors' tattoos. Children's Mayan handprints. Archaeologists from the National Institute of Anthropology and History of Yucatan claimed that they discovered the cave nearly 2 decades before making their discovery public, but they chose to keep it a secret for fear of it being harmed. The spookiest part of the discovery was the 137 black and crimson handprints on the wall, which stood out among the Maya artifacts, which included pottery and bones. It is thought that the cave, which is situated beneath a sacred ceiba tree, had a crucial role in the ceremonies of young Maya who lived about 1,200 years ago. According to archaeologist Sergio Grosjean, children are thought to have visited the cave to first mark the stone with their black handprints, which symbolized death. But that didn't mean they were going to be killed. Rather, death from a ritual perspective was followed by their red handprints, which was a reference to war or life. Additionally, it wasn't just a routine ceremony. Children who were born during the handprint era experienced a profound shift in their culture. It would have been dreadful to be alive during a period of droughts that were so severe that they caused widespread death and the downfall of cities that had once been prosperous. A set-up base for the dead. The Sculptor's Cave in Scotland is difficult to access, and even if someone does, time is running out. The cave on Moray's sandstone sea cliffs is only reachable during low tide. Now that a complete 3D model of the cave has been created, archaeologists can investigate it safely from another location. According to Canterbury Christ Church University, more of the cave's secrets have been revealed since it was first found in the 1920s. It was originally utilized circa 1000 BC, and is one of the few locations where evidence of Scotland's prehistoric dead has been discovered. According to Ian Armitt of the University of Bradford, this is the time when prehistoric people practiced excarnation or exposure burial. The dead were left out in the open to slowly deteriorate and rot while leaving clues that the living would continue to visit during this time. There were a lot of young people and skulls, along with signs that the individuals whose bones were there had endured a lot of hardship throughout their lives. Scientists are still unsure of why people were brought to such a difficult-to-reach location or why some of their bones have knife marks, suggesting that they had been skinned and dismembered. Later, the cave was also used as a Pictish site. The cave's entrance is adorned with unique symbols from the Iron Age, and it is thought that the significance of the location continued to change over time and with successive generations. Chauvet-Pont-d'Arc Cave. There is a significant possibility that if the French Chauvet-Pont-d'Arc cave had never collapsed, it would not be the undisputed treasure that it is today. In 1994, a group of speleologists, scientists, and researchers on prehistoric man opened a previously sealed-off section of the cave. There, they found paintings that had been covered up for tens of thousands of years. They could tell that the cave had been sealed for a very long time because they could smell the damp air, and they also knew that they were the first humans to enter this area of the cave in a very long time. About 3,000 years after the cave paintings were finished, according to radiocarbon dating, there was a rockfall that sealed the site. The location dates to between 32,000 and 30,000 years ago, during a time when humans would have coexisted with extinct creatures, including cave lions and woolly rhinoceroses, according to the carbon dating of the bones and other artifacts discovered within. If they were cautious with the cave paintings, they could still learn about the people who produced them, since the collapse preserved them in a condition that would have otherwise been impossible. Which should make things extremely interesting, because it wasn't until about 25,000 years later that humans started creating works of comparable sophistication and grace. Ancient fossil of a skull. The size of the world's oldest intact skull fossil, about 1.2 inches by 1.2 inches, contrasts with its enormous importance. It was discovered in 2019 at the Drimmelen Paleo Cave in South Africa, and is approximately 2 million years old. The fossil, identified as belonging to Paranthropus robustus, an ancient cousin of humans, was crucial for comprehending the variations among ancient human species that were living around the same time. According to Live Science, the specimen was discovered in a sedimentary wall after rain had worn away some of the rock. The skull fragment took years to recover since it was so small. After it was reassembled, the fossil was crucial in understanding the disappearance of this and other archaic species, as well as the dominance of Homo erectus as the sole surviving species. The information that South Africa may have been home to a sizable group of diverse species more than 2 million years ago is equally intriguing. However, climate change seems to have been the last nail in the coffin for several of them, including Paranthropus robustus. Spanish massacre. Neanderthals died off, but not before a long, brutal struggle with Homo sapiens. The remains of a massacre, in which a group of Neanderthals were killed and dragged into the cave, were discovered in the Spanish cave of El Cedrón, and that was the evidence. But the tale doesn't end there. There were 49,000 years of traces left in the cave by various Neanderthal groups. This indicates that the cave had some unique significance that extended far beyond the massacre's scope. According to archaeologist Antonio Rosas of the Spanish National Museum of Natural Sciences, the massacre victims were not just murdered in the cave. The entire group was taken into the cave so that they could be skinned, dismembered, and eaten. There are proof points that suggest that these were tough times for them. The bones contain cut marks, which indicate cannibalism. Even though the bones are thousands of years old, the evidence of their harsh living conditions, even in their final hours, is still there. According to a related archaeological discovery from Croatia's Krapina Neanderthal site, the group suffered from conditions such as tooth infections, which are still an issue today. The cave also included a molar tooth, which suggests that there was still quite a bit of research to be done on the evidence that had been discovered there. Guano. For those who don't know what guano is, it's the accumulation of bat excrement in a cave. And if that makes you wonder what kind of shocking discovery is to follow, be Be prepared for the revelation that in this instance, scientists' investigations led them to investigate some really old guano. The old bat droppings offer a glimpse into what ancient, prehistoric ecosystems were like. What could be learned about the ancient planet from guano? According to archaeologist Damian Ruiz Rodriguez, guano is incredibly stable over time. It provides a window into the animals, plants, and climates that formerly existed. The guano provides an intriguing glimpse into the past in the hands of experts who extract information from it. According to David Tatum of the University of Bristol, by examining the poop, researchers can determine the time periods during which the bats fed on animals and plants. The study was able to determine that thousands of years ago, the Sahara Desert was lush and green. These unsettling finds from the past provide a remarkable window into a world we had little knowledge of.